Is there such a thing in this realm? Well, hey there. Welcome back. Are you injured? Are you okay? Now, why would I ask that? Let's take a step back. Something I like to do a lot, or something I end up doing, or something I just do. So as far as like the why or what's behind it, let's not get into that. But something I do is I make conceptual metaphors quite a bit. An interesting description of that is also analogical reasoning. It's really applying a concept from one domain to another. And if you're still not following what I'm saying, it's basically what I've done on a lot of the podcast episodes in which I say, hey, this thing exists in this realm. Is there such a thing in this realm? For example, we talked about liminal spaces, and the liminal space is an area that just doesn't feel right. It's the in-between. It's like you go to a mall, it's fully lit, and everything looks fine, but nobody's there, right? Or you go to a place that has, in-ground pools and things, and there's no water in the pools. But to apply cross-domain thinking, to move from one domain to another, we say, well, what about an emotional liminal space? And one example is someone on the night just before their wedding. They're not really single, they're not really married yet, but they're just on the curtain. You probably feel that same weird liminal feeling when you're in the doctor's office, where you're not relaxing at home, but you're not in the doctor's office discussing the issue. You're in the waiting room emotionally and physically. So I want to apply that same kind of cross-domain thinking to something else. And that something else is injuries. So we've all experienced a physical injury, whether it was an accident, we fell down, something happened, we were even in a car accident, unfortunately, or something bizarre happens in our life that causes us to have surgery, health issues, what have you. It's an injury in some way that's physical to us, and we get on the mend. I don't have to tell you about emotional injuries, and tough people will say, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I've been through. Yeah. That's all in the past." Well, sometimes even with the best kind of thoughtfulness and emotional protection, we can still sometimes be injured emotionally, in which someone says something that's intentionally or unintentionally hurtful, and it affects us. Sometimes it will affect us in a way that we would have never imagined, and we just think, wow, why am I getting so upset at this? Why is this? Oh my God, this bothers me. Why is this bothering me so much? And the answer to that is typically something I talk about in my new book, which is the causes. It's something embedded that is there to direct you, and this triggers that. So we all know about those two kinds of injuries, but let me throw a third at you. What about an intellectual injury? No, wouldn't be ego now, would it? Because ego would basically be emotional. Or would it? So what would the definition of an intellectual injury look like? And what would the cause of that be? How would it be something that you could experience? And have we all gone through intellectual injuries? If we follow the same definition of the two other injuries, it's basically something that happens without our doing as far as we know. It's something that causes pain, and in some cases far more pain than we expected. And it's something that we recover from. And when you recover from an injury, you give it more attention than you normally would. If you hurt your shoulder, you give your shoulder more tender, loving care. You're easier about things. You go, oh, nope, can't move my arm there. Oh, I better not carry that grocery bag there. If you're working out and you're blasting your quads and you know who you are, you may overdo it a bit, or you may say no pain, no gain, and then the next day you're really paying for it. Or you may push a little too hard, because certain muscles respond a lot better than other ones do. Aha. So you can go for a 30-mile bike ride and walk funny when you get home, but the next day, for the most part, everything's fine. But if you do that with your stomach muscles, it's going to feel like somebody punched you. So we sort of nurse back to health the part of us that we have hurt physically. We do that emotionally. If we get hurt emotionally, we have a breakup or what have you, we definitely avoid certain songs. or smells or experiences and so forth until we can kind of deal with it again. So again, intellectually, what would an injury look like? Would it be you trying to solve a problem and you fail to solve the problem? So something like taking a test and failing? Is that an intellectual injury? Or is an intellectual injury having a firm, absolute belief in something and finding that it's not true? Finding that you were wrong about something? See, in the first instance, you basically didn't know enough about what you were trying to show. In the case of a test, right? You need more information. You weren't clear on something. You got some of it right, but not enough of it right. You're not going to go take a test and get a 0. But in the case of the latter, in which you find that you are absolutely wrong, let's say on something, 180 degrees. And if you think that doesn't happen, that actually happens all the time, where people have a strong belief system or they've been led to believe a certain thing, and then one day, because of an accident of information, or they are presented with information that they normally wouldn't be presented with, and they're left alone with it, and they say, well, wait, that can't, wait, is that true? Wait. And then they look it up and they find that it is true, and then they think, well, if that's true, then this, oh my God, I've been wrong. So that, my friends, is an intellectual injury. And like the other two kinds of injuries, you tend to focus on the spot that incurred the injury. And in the case of an intellectual one, you think, well, wait a second. If I hurt my intellectual shoulder, I better look at the rest of my arm and my chest. What if I'm moving wrong there too? And you start to expand and expand. And I applaud that. And I think that is one of the most amazing things that a person can do. Not only do you give that part of your reasoning some tender, loving care, and in other words, more energy to keep looking into the thing that you were wrong about, which is exactly the opposite of putting your head down and saying, I don't want to think about that. I'm just, no, I don't, that makes me angry. No, I don't want to think about that. It's exactly the opposite. Not only do you give it this TLC, but you also strengthen it. Almost anyone who has had an injury, especially physically, typically gets through it being stronger in that area. They know how to move it now, and they realize their muscles are weak. A lot of back injury issues are because core muscles are weak. And when people build their core up and they do sit-ups and all that stuff, then they find that they don't really hurt their back all that much. People who build a good emotional understanding of things tend to not be injured easily when it comes to their egos or taking things the wrong way. They develop that quote-unquote thick skin, although I really don't think that's a good metaphor. So in the case of an intellectual injury, again, you're not only going to give it the TLC, but you're going to develop it more. You're going to strengthen it. And this is why people who have thought something for a very long time and had their eyes opened to something else tend to be the champions of it. They tend to be the people who are really, really strong on a subject. And while their counterparts are busy being filled with fervor about it, they're just frantically trying to explain a point to you, they tend to be more calm and even keeled because they've gone through the ringer on it. They were that other person, and now they've figured it out. And so they will say, no, actually, here's why, and here's some citations, and here's this. And then they pull out the ultimate card where they say, I used to think just like you. I know exactly why you feel that way, and so forth. So it's an amazing kind of intellectual awakening, I think. And as always, I bring this to your attention because that's the format I use. I bring something to your attention first, and you go, wait, that thing exists, Mark? Oh, I never thought about that. Or I never thought about that in this way. And then I sort of say, okay, and here's what you can do with it. So in the case of an intellectual injury, maybe right now is a good time to think about any that you've had. And if you found you really haven't had any, or think you haven't had any, maybe past 7, like once you hit 8 years old, you're like, I'm good. I know everything now. Maybe you don't. I would submit to you that if you're listening to this particular podcast, and I don't even mean this type, I mean my Alchemy for Life podcast, my Mark Bradford Alchemy for Life podcast, I would submit to you, you are probably the kind of person who risks an intellectual injury, much like the person who is heavily involved in sports or somebody who puts their heart out there to love very deeply and risk being hurt. You are the kind of person that risks intellectual injury by going, okay, what crazy stuff is he going to say this time? What can I learn? And I appreciate that to a level that you don't even realize. So your homework until next time is to think about intellectual injuries that you've had and whether you risk having more, and take care of yourself. Thank you.
Living life every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days. Yeah.
Join the community, patreon.com/alchemy for life. Oh, and my 10th book is now coming out.
Every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days.